She was dismissed at the bank for her appearance, but he didn't know who she really was. Samantha Evans was the kind of woman who knew what she wanted from an early age. By 36, she had achieved far more than anyone could have imagined. Coming from a humble family, she grew up in a small suburb of Velmor, where opportunities seemed scarce, and success was a distant word, almost a dream reserved for those born with silver spoons. But Samantha possessed something that many around her didn't seem to understand: an unbreakable determination and a vision that allowed her to see beyond hardships. Her routine was meticulously planned. She would wake up before dawn, when the world was still quiet and the city asleep. This was her favorite time of day, the only moment she could afford to sit alone in her spacious, modern kitchen, sipping strong coffee while mentally reviewing her weekly goals. Each step, each small achievement was a victory for her, and she valued even the smallest progress. She had learned to celebrate her personal victories, even when no one else was around to notice. On that particular morning, Samantha was more reflective than usual. Her investments had multiplied recently, and she knew she was at a point where new opportunities could arise, but they would require strategic decisions. She had built a solid portfolio, but knew she needed professional guidance for the next step. So, she decided it was time to seek the support of experts at one of Velmor's most renowned banks. After finishing her coffee, Samantha stood up, her gaze determined. She walked through her room to her spacious closet, running her fingers over the fine fabrics of her clothes. She chose an elegant yet simple outfit: black tailored pants paired with a dark blue silk blouse. The ensemble was classic, with no hint of ostentation. Samantha didn't see the need to dress to impress. She knew her value lay in who she was and what she had accomplished, not in what she wore. After all, a person's true power is in their self-confidence and the calm with which they face life. As she left her house, the light touch of the wind on her face made her smile. She walked through Velmor's bustling streets, absorbing the city's energy. The modern buildings and skyscrapers reflected her own growth. It was as if each building, each towering structure represented a part of her journey. The walk to the bank was short but enough for Samantha to reflect on how far she had come. She knew that, in this city, many had underestimated her over the years, and rather than discouraging her, that fueled her drive to grow. As soon as Samantha crossed the bank's doors, she felt the contrast of the sophisticated environment. It was a place designed to impress: marble walls, crystal chandeliers, and an almost theatrical level of service. She had been to many places like this throughout her career, but each time she entered one, she was reminded of where she came from and how much she had to work to get there. Samantha took a deep breath and walked toward the reception with a steady stride, determined to handle what she needed and continue with her growth plans. The receptionist, a young woman with a friendly smile, greeted her and asked about the purpose of her visit. Samantha explained that she was looking for a high-value investment consultation, and the receptionist promptly guided her to wait on one of the dark leather couches until the manager was available. She sat down, trying to relax as she observed the bank's activity. Executives entered and exited, conversations in low tones echoed through the lobby, and the sound of keyboard typing created a subtle, rhythmic melody. It was an environment of productivity and power. As she waited, Samantha lost herself in thought. She remembered how, years ago, she had worked in a small accounting office, barely covering her expenses. The path had been arduous, filled with sleepless nights and relentless days of work. And now, here she was, in one of the largest banks in the city, about to make a significant investment. She smiled to herself, with the satisfaction of someone who had overcome great challenges. Time passed quickly until a voice pulled her out of her reverie. "Ms. Evans," called the manager, a middle-aged man in a flawless suit, but with a slightly rigid and cold expression. John Miller was known for his professionalism, but also for his tendency to quickly judge people by their appearance. He offered a firm handshake, but his eyes quickly swept over Samantha's appearance, assessing her superficially. Samantha noticed Miller's glance and, though she didn't show it, noted the subtle condescension emanating from him. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she replied, keeping her tone firm and confident. Miller led her to a glass-walled meeting room, where it was clear he had already drawn some conclusions about her. It was as if, with a simple glance, he had decided that Samantha wasn't there for anything particularly important. As she sat down, Samantha felt a twinge of discomfort. She had been in situations like this before, where people underestimated her either for not knowing her real story or for judging her simplicity. However, she decided she wouldn't let it affect her. She was there with a clear purpose and would stay focused. "So, Miss Evans, how may I assist you?" Miller asked, with a tone that tried to sound polite but carried a slight hint of impatience. Samantha took a deep breath, staying calm. She briefly explained what she wanted, to discuss expanding her investments based on her current portfolio. The manager, however, didn't seem to take her seriously. "This type of service typically requires a significant initial amount," he explained, emphasizing each word as if speaking to a child. "Usually, we guide our clients with a specific profile toward this kind of investment." Samantha listened patiently, but deep down, she felt the weight of prejudice. It wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her ability, and it likely wouldn't be the last. She knew that the true test would come in the next stages when he would realize the error of his judgment. Samantha settled into the comfortable brown leather armchair, feeling the soft, cool material under her hands. She took in the decor of the meeting room, designed to impress with its minimalism and elegance. A shelf filled with finance books was strategically placed to lend an intellectual air to the space, while a glass window displayed the urban landscape of Velmor. The environment was impeccable, crafted to engage clients and provide a sense of exclusivity. John Miller sat across from Samantha, holding a tablet, his expression mildly impassive. He exuded the confidence of someone who believed he had full control over the situation. John was the typical bank manager who had earned his position through dedication but also through his ability to read clients, or so he thought. For him, a person's appearance was the key to understanding their financial profile, and he seemed unwilling to abandon that belief. "So, Miss Evans, may I start by asking a few questions about what brings you here?" he said, his tone professional but somewhat distant. There was a weight to his words, as if each phrase were calculated, measured, and delivered with precision. Samantha nodded, remaining composed. She knew that this attitude of control and judgment was common among many managers and consultants, but it wouldn't shake her. "Certainly, Mr. Miller. I'm interested in discussing the possibility of expanding my investments. I have a diversified portfolio, but I believe it's time to seek new opportunities to optimize my capital," Samantha replied, her voice firm and clear. John looked at her with an almost condescending smile. He adjusted his tie and cast a glance over Samantha's modest attire, her calm manner, and perhaps a hint of humility in her speech. He didn't seem convinced he was dealing with an important client. To him, Samantha was just another curious individual exploring investments, perhaps someone trying to grow in a market he deemed reserved for a select few. "I understand, Miss Evans," he replied, emphasizing the formal tone, "but as you may know, our bank offers an exclusive portfolio for clients of a certain asset level." He paused, leaving the sentence hanging, as if waiting for Samantha to catch on to the impression he was trying to convey. Samantha raised an eyebrow but remained silent. She had learned that silence could be more powerful than any word in certain situations. She watched the manager patiently, trying to see how far he would go with this attitude. She knew that many still believed a person's worth could be measured by appearance or tone of voice, but she preferred to wait and see how far he would venture with his superficial judgment. "These investments generally require a significant initial commitment," John continued, leaning slightly forward as if to get closer to Samantha and speak in a confidential tone. "Typically, that initial amount is in the six-figure range, so we need to assess if that's feasible for you." Samantha took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his insinuation. It was clear he had already drawn his conclusions. And while part of her wanted to cut off that unnecessary conversation and get straight to the point, another part of her wanted to see how far he would go with that condescending tone. A faint shadow of irritation crossed her face, but she quickly dispelled it with a smile. "I understand, Mr. Miller," she replied, her tone still calm. "But I believe those amounts won't be an issue for me. I'm interested in exploring a more robust investment portfolio. My aim is to seek something that can optimize returns while maintaining a certain level of security." John hesitated for a brief second, surprised by Samantha's firmness. He had expected her to give up or change the subject. Her conviction caught him off guard, but he quickly regained control, adjusting his posture and folding his hands over the tablet. "Well," he said, maintaining his tone but now visibly more attentive, "we can start exploring some investment options. However, I'd like to point out that access to our wealth management services requires certain initial verifications. It's a standard procedure here, simply to ensure that our clients fit the ideal profile." The explanation seemed rehearsed, as if he wanted to prepare Samantha for the idea that perhaps she didn't fit the profile he considered appropriate. It was evident that John wanted to politely discourage her from proceeding, though his approach carried a strong undertone of veiled prejudice. Samantha noted that instead of discussing investment opportunities, he focused on restrictions and requirements that, to her, sounded more like unnecessary barriers. "I fully understand," Samantha responded, with a hint of a challenge in her tone. "I believe I won't have any trouble meeting the bank's requirements. I'm prepared to discuss any verification you consider necessary." John swallowed hard. He hadn't expected such confidence from someone he viewed as just a curious visitor. Nevertheless, his posture remained rigid, as if he didn't want to yield. "All right, Ms. Evans," he continued, now with a more serious tone, "let's start with some basic questions about your current portfolio. Could you give me a general idea of where your investments are?" Samantha smiled, leaning slightly forward, determined to answer with the same firmness and without hesitation. "Certainly, Mr. Miller. My investments include stocks in tech companies, real estate investment trusts, a significant stake in innovation startups, and an international portfolio of bonds and commodities. Recently, I've developed an interest in exploring new opportunities in green technology and blockchain markets." John observed her with a slight trace of disbelief. He tried to maintain a neutral expression, but couldn't hide the surprise and skepticism that arose. Apparently, Samantha knew far more about investments than he had anticipated. "That's impressive, Ms. Evans," he said dryly, trying not to show that he was gradually being confronted by his own assumptions. Yet he still clung to the idea that, somehow, this client didn't quite fit the profile he had expected. As Samantha continued talking about her financial interests and objectives, John took notes on his tablet, but his thoughts were racing. He needed to find a way to close that consultation without seeming dismissive, but with each sentence from her, his task became more challenging. There was something about her that challenged him, a confidence that didn't match the superficial image he had formed based on her modest appearance. At the end of the conversation, John forced a smile. "Thank you, Ms. Evans, for sharing so much information. I'll review our options and get back to you soon to move forward." Samantha detected the discomfort in his voice but chose not to confront him openly, yet. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'll be waiting." She stood up, casting a final firm look at the manager before leaving the room. She sensed that, for some reason, he had underestimated her abilities, and that feeling of being judged solely by her appearance deeply unsettled her. She decided, then, that she would take one more step toward revelation. After leaving the meeting room, Samantha walked over to the waiting area. Her steps were light, but they carried the firmness of someone who knew exactly where she was headed. Inside, however, she felt a slight discomfort. John's treatment hadn't been overtly disrespectful, but it carried a degree of condescension she recognized all too well. As she sat down, memories of times in her life when she had been judged solely by her appearance or simplicity resurfaced. For her, John's prejudice was nothing new, yet it always stirred deep irritation. While she waited, she observed the activity around her. The waiting area was filled with other clients, each with different profiles and purposes. There were young entrepreneurs as well as elderly individuals discussing finances with bank assistants. For many, the bank was a place of trust, where their financial plans took shape. Samantha reflected on how appearances influenced the behavior of certain professionals. In a place like this, where discretion and equality should prevail, it frustrated her to realize that a high-level manager like John Miller still based his conclusions on superficial judgments. A few minutes later, John reappeared, calling her back into the room. He seemed a bit more cautious, but still carried that slightly stiff and, perhaps, distrustful expression. Samantha took a deep breath and decided to maintain her composure. She would not let him affect her, nor would she show any hint of insecurity. "So, Miss Evans," he began, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from her, "after our brief conversation, I've come up with a few investment alternatives. However, I should remind you that these financial products have very specific fees and limits, and it would be wise for us to evaluate the conditions together to see if they match your profile." John's tone was dry and formal, but Samantha sensed that he was still trying to insinuate that she wasn't prepared for this type of transaction. It almost felt like a test, as if he hoped she would back off, sparing him from having to treat her with the respect she deserved. However, Samantha maintained her firm posture and simply listened. "Mr. Miller," she said, a slight note of patience in her voice, "I am aware of the costs and fees associated with these investments. I've participated in similar consultations and understand the importance of a careful assessment. My goal is to make a solid investment, and I'm ready to proceed with that." Her firmness caused him to hesitate for a moment. He quickly glanced at his tablet and began listing some financial products, but his tone remained cold and unenthusiastic. It was as if he were fulfilling a formality, avoiding any real depth in the discussion. "Well, then, we have a few options," he said, listing funds that were clearly entry-level, conservative products with modest returns and low risk. Samantha listened to each detail he presented, noticing that he still wasn't taking her seriously. Despite her extensive experience and financial knowledge, John was treating her as a novice. "These funds are interesting, Mr. Miller," she commented, with a calmness that concealed her irritation. "However, I believe I'm past the stage of conservative investments. I'm looking for something bolder, like a high-yield portfolio, possibly with greater exposure to the technology and sustainability markets." Samantha's response made John avert his gaze for a moment, as if he hadn't anticipated that she would be so knowledgeable about the topic. A faint look of surprise crossed his face, but he quickly regained his formal, careful demeanor. "Oh, I see," he said, still hesitant. "Well, these more aggressive types of investments are typically reserved for a somewhat higher profile of client. I'm not sure if you're fully aware of the risks involved." Samantha took a deep breath. John's attitude was clear now, and she felt he was testing her, as if waiting for some indication that she wasn't up to the task. She decided to be more direct, subtly putting him to the test. "Mr. Miller, I've been an investor for years," she said, looking at him seriously. "I understand the risks, but I also know how to evaluate the returns of each of these products. I've dealt with ups and downs in the markets, so I know exactly what I'm looking for. Now, I'd rather not waste time with low-return products." Silence filled the room for a few seconds. John looked disconcerted, but he could no longer hide the surprise on his face. Samantha, though calm, felt that she was in a silent struggle to command his respect. After a moment, John cleared his throat and tried to continue the conversation, now selecting the riskier financial products she had mentioned. Even so, he still hesitated to suggest the bank's best options. Samantha could see he was avoiding discussing the most prestigious offers, as if he wanted to steer her away from those possibilities. She was increasingly convinced that, regardless of her words or demeanor, John still saw her as someone unfit for this type of transaction. "I think we can move on to some higher-yield products," he said, with a coolness that hinted at his resistance. These options I'm about to mention are a bit more complex, so if you'd prefer, I can provide a more detailed summary or even suggest a junior consultant to assist." Samantha smiled, but internally she felt exhausted by this treatment. She knew he was suggesting an assistant in an attempt to delegate her service and avoid any direct confrontation with her. She didn't want to be attended to by a novice, but at the same time, she recognized the need to make her place clear. "Mr. Miller, I appreciate it, but I'd prefer to continue with you. I'm already familiar with these products and don't need a simplified introduction," she affirmed, maintaining a professional tone. "Just present the most suitable options, and I'll decide what's of interest." John seemed to wrestle with himself. He wanted to question her, but at the same time, he was realizing that she was far more capable than he had assumed. For Samantha, it was clear that his behavior revealed an arrogance that prevented him from treating her equally, but she still held out hope that he would come to realize this. With no other options, he began to present some of the more sophisticated investment options, but his tone remained cautious. Samantha observed him closely, noticing the hesitation in every word. It was as if he were trying to convince her that this environment wasn't for her. But at the same time, Samantha remained patient, waiting for him to finally recognize her value. When the conversation seemed close to ending, Samantha decided to take it a step further. "Mr. Miller, I know these products are high tier, but you need to understand, I'm here because I trust the bank's capacity to manage substantial assets. I'm not a curious client. I'm here to conduct serious business." Her statement echoed through the room like a final declaration, firm and definitive. For the first time, John appeared genuinely affected. He blinked a few times, trying to process her stance and what it meant to have underestimated Samantha. The air in the room felt heavy. Samantha looked directly at John, with an expression he couldn't ignore. For the first time, he realized he was dealing with someone very different from his initial assumptions. She wasn't just any client, and she wasn't there to test the waters or explore the market. Her firm words indicated that she indeed had full confidence in her value and would not tolerate being treated otherwise. "Mr. Miller," Samantha began, her tone calm yet resolute, "I understand that the bank values a consultative approach and prides itself on personalized service. That is exactly what I'm looking for here, excellent service that aligns with my financial profile and expectations. I believe I am in the right place, but I need to feel that my investment will be treated with the same seriousness I've always applied to managing my own assets." John adjusted his posture, as if trying to recompose himself. Samantha continued to watch him, waiting for a response that would show he truly understood and respected her. The bank he worked for had an impeccable reputation, but he was beginning to realize that reputation alone couldn't save him from a serious service failure if he continued with his arrogant approach. "Ms. Evans, I appreciate your candor," he responded, trying to keep control of the situation. "I understand that you're looking for service that reflects your profile, and I will do my best to meet your expectations." Still, Samantha could sense the resistance in his words, a slight hesitation that betrayed that, despite his efforts to sound cordial, he still saw her with a degree of distrust. She took a deep breath, deciding she couldn't let this slide. "Mr. Miller," she said, leaning slightly forward, "I feel that, since I entered here, there has been some reluctance in showing me the options I'm actually seeking. I understand the importance of following bank procedures, but I sense that something beyond procedures has influenced our conversation. Can we be honest with each other?" John swallowed hard. He hadn't expected her to be so direct. In his experience, clients rarely broached this kind of issue, especially not so frankly. He hesitated for a moment but knew he needed to respond. "Ms. Evans, I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. That wasn't my intention," he replied, avoiding direct eye contact. "I'm simply trying to ensure that our clients are well informed and that the process is as transparent as possible." Samantha noticed his attempt to skirt the issue. She knew that, deep down, John had been influenced by a superficial assessment based solely on appearance. She felt disappointed but was also determined not to back down. "I understand your position, Mr. Miller, she replied, with a faint smile that masked her frustration. "But you should know that I'm well versed in the financial market and fully aware of the products I'm seeking. I can assure you that I meet all the criteria for the bank's more demanding investments. What I expect, and I believe every client expects, is fair and equal treatment." Those words echoed in the silence of the room. John looked away at his tablet, as if trying to buy himself some time to think. For a moment, he seemed on the verge of saying something but chose to remain silent. It was clear that Samantha's words had struck him directly. "Perfectly understood, Miss Evans," he said, still with evident hesitation. "Let's proceed with the options you mentioned." Samantha nodded, sensing that, perhaps, she was finally breaking down the barrier he had built. But there was still a tension in the air, a resistance that left her feeling not entirely confident that John had truly grasped her position. He still seemed to want to keep control somehow. Samantha decided, then, to take one final step to make it clear she demanded the respect she was due. "Mr. Miller," she said calmly, "I understand that appearances can influence people's perceptions, and I know many judge based on surface impressions. But I ask that you not underestimate who I am. My portfolio, along with my experience, has been built with great effort and strategy. I expect nothing less than service that is worthy of what I represent." Those words felt like a blow. John took a deep breath, visibly affected. It was clear that he was beginning to see the situation from a new perspective, though he was still trying to maintain his professional stance. He knew Samantha was right. In a professional environment like this, any kind of superficial judgment could be a serious mistake, and he was risking his own reputation. "I understand, Miss Evans. I believe I may have left the wrong impression, and I apologize if my approach suggested otherwise," he said, finally acknowledging his mistake, albeit with a touch of embarrassment. "You have my word that I will handle your case with the appropriate attention and respect." The atmosphere felt lighter, but Samantha wasn't entirely convinced. The apology sounded like an attempt to repair what was already done, and she knew this was just the beginning. She sensed that, despite his shift in tone, there was still a trace of his initial distrust. "I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Miller," Samantha replied, her look making it clear she would be watching every step from here on out. "Let's move forward, then. I'd like to see all the options I mentioned earlier, without restrictions." John nodded, this time with a bit more humility, and began to list the high-yield investments that Samantha had requested. As he explained the features and potential returns, she listened carefully but also noted how he still seemed a bit uncomfortable, as if this moment were forcing him to reflect. Samantha felt relieved to have maintained her position, though she also regretted that, even in the business world, one had to assert their own worth in a situation where they should be treated like any other high-profile client. She knew that, upon leaving there, her decision about whether to continue her investments with that bank would depend on how he continued to treat her. "These are the main options," John said, concluding the presentation with a more serious but still slightly cautious air. "I believe you'll find alternatives aligned with your interests." Samantha looked at him for a few seconds, assessing whether he had truly learned the lesson. She decided to give the manager one last chance. After all, her own experience had taught her that everyone could learn and redeem themselves. "Very well, Mr. Miller," she finally said, leaning back in her chair with a faint smile. "Thank you for presenting the options. I'll review them and decide on the next steps. Can I count on your support for the final details?" John nodded, now with a look that was slightly more sincere. "Of course, Ms. Evans. I'll be available to ensure you have the best experience with our services." At the end of the conversation, Samantha stood up and shook John's hand. But as she left the room, she knew that the matter was far from over. She would make it clear that no client should be underestimated and that respect was essential. Her next step would be decisive. Samantha left the bank that day with a mixture of emotions. The gentle breeze of Velmor enveloped her as she walked through the bustling streets, but her mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts that transported her back to challenging moments in her life. The encounter with John Miller had resurfaced memories she had kept carefully tucked away for years, like old pages of a book she rarely opened. From a young age, Samantha had learned the weight of being underestimated. She had grown up in a modest neighborhood where dreams were often limited by harsh realities. Her family lived simply, and although they were close and loving, resources were always scarce. Her parents worked hard to provide the basics for her and her siblings, but from an early age, Samantha knew she would need to fight for a different future. She remembered her first work experience, just after turning 18. She had gotten a job as an assistant in a small accounting office. It was a modest opportunity, but for Samantha, it was an important step toward independence. However, even there, she faced judgments. The manager of that office, a man of few words with a stern gaze, doubted her capabilities from day one. He believed that, coming from a humble family and with no background in finance, she wouldn't have much to offer. She recalled those early days in the office vividly. Her tasks were simple: filing documents, answering phones, and organizing the manager's schedule. Despite the simplicity, Samantha performed each task with precision and dedication, as though they were the most important in the world. Yet, she could feel her boss's judgmental stare, his constant corrections delivered with impatience, never satisfied with her work. It seemed that, no matter how hard she tried, he had already categorized her as less capable. Over time, Samantha decided she needed to prove her worth. She spent nights studying accounting and finance, determined to go beyond the basics. With borrowed books and an old computer that barely worked, she started delving into subjects that intrigued her. At that time, her nights were long, but each page she read was another building block in her foundation of knowledge. She was determined to turn those criticisms into fuel for growth. And so she did. Within a few months, Samantha developed an almost intuitive understanding of the office's processes. She suggested improvements, pointed out errors that more experienced colleagues had missed, and gradually earned their respect. Even the manager, who had initially dismissed her, began to notice her progress and assign her more complex tasks. However, the initial prejudice she had felt left a lasting impression, teaching her the importance of moving forward, regardless of others' opinions. Returning to the present, Samantha felt a mix of pride and indignation as she recalled those moments. She thought about how such experiences had shaped her character, teaching her to stand firm in the face of any attempts at undermining her. And now, facing John Miller and his prejudiced stance, she realized this was a battle she had been fighting for years in different settings, but always with the same resolve. She continued to walk through the streets of Velmor, taking in the city that was now her home. She looked at the modern buildings, the corporate offices, and thought about how she had carved out her own space in a world that seemed reluctant to accept people from her background. In this city, she had built a solid career, one that now allowed her to enjoy a financially stable life and significant accomplishments. But even with all of that, she still faced prejudice, like what she had just experienced. The memories continued to flow, and Samantha remembered a particularly painful episode shortly after her promotion to manager at an investment firm. It was a role with great responsibility, and she had been chosen for her dedication and competence. However, upon assuming the position, she noticed that many colleagues questioned her new role. Some made subtle comments, suggesting that perhaps she was there due to its strategic decisions by the company, implying that her abilities alone did not justify the role. It was as if they believed her modest background and reserved demeanor prevented her from being an effective leader. The memory of those moments caused her some discomfort, but also a sense of victory. Samantha knew each of these challenges had strengthened her determination. She had faced skeptical glances, insinuations, and even outright disrespect, but she never allowed any of it to define her. On the contrary, she used each criticism as motivation to grow and prove herself, not to others, but to herself. Stopping in front of a busy cafe in the center of Velmor, Samantha decided to go in and take a break. She ordered an espresso and sat by the window to watch the streets outside. She enjoyed moments like these, times when she could reflect on her journey and remember who she truly was. She knew that by confronting attitudes like John Miller's, she was not only defending herself but also standing up for everyone who, like her, had been judged by appearance or background. As she sipped her coffee, she remembered her mother's words, a strong and wise woman who always said, "You are as great as your courage, Samantha. And your courage only grows each time you refuse to give up." That phrase echoed in her mind like a mantra, and Samantha felt renewed upon recalling it. She knew that the next day, she would return to the bank with the same determination, ready to ensure her right to be treated with respect. In the end, as her coffee grew cold in her hands, Samantha decided that the incident with John Miller would not end with a mere apology. She deserved dignified service, and she was willing to go as far as necessary to ensure that every other client, regardless of appearance or background, would be treated equally. She had in mind that her next visit to the bank wouldn't just be an investment consultation, but an opportunity to show that no one should be judged on the surface. With this renewed conviction, she stood up, leaving a generous tip for the server, who thanked her with a sincere smile. Samantha returned the smile and left the cafe with a firm stride, knowing that the path she had chosen wasn't easy, but that each challenge overcome made it worthwhile. From that moment on, Samantha carried not only the strength of someone who had earned her place but also the desire to inspire change. She knew that every battle, no matter how small, was an essential piece in her puzzle of success. And in John Miller's case, she intended to show that respect is the foundation of any relationship, especially in a professional environment. John Miller was back in his office after meeting with Samantha Evans, but unlike his other consultations at the bank, he couldn't focus on the rest of his work. Sitting in his leather chair, still holding the tablet, he stared at the screen without really absorbing what was in front of him. Samantha had left an unexpectedly deep impression on him, one he wasn't sure how to process. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as he mentally replayed the conversation. It was unusual for him to feel unsettled after a client meeting, but the experience with Samantha had been different. She had remained firm and confident, and it had left him off balance. For the first time in a long while, John found himself questioning his own attitudes and choices. He remembered the way he had observed her when she first entered the bank. To him, it seemed natural to assess clients quickly and efficiently, often based on appearance and first impressions. Over the years, he had learned to read people this way, and it had become almost an instinct. However, with Samantha, he felt his approach had led him to make a serious mistake, and now, alone in his office, he was beginning to wonder if he was truly seeing his clients as he should. As he stared at the screen, he recalled every word Samantha had spoken. She had spoken with a knowledge and authority he hadn't expected. He had thought she was just another curious client, perhaps with little experience in the market, but she had demonstrated a deep and assured understanding of financial products. The discomfort he felt now wasn't just from underestimating someone, it was from realizing he had treated a client unfairly, something he had never wanted to admit. With a heavy sigh, John closed the tablet and stood up, walking over to his office window. The view of Velmor stretched out before him, with its skyscrapers and modern buildings, a scene of success and power, much like the world he inhabited at the bank. For a long time, he had believed his judgment was infallible, that his ability to discern client profiles was an asset. But now he was beginning to question if this ability was actually a reflection of unfounded biases and assumptions. As he watched the movement below, he thought of other clients he had served over the years. How many times had he acted similarly? How often had he failed to see the true potential of people because of an initial impression? He remembered a young man who, a few years earlier, had come into the bank with a simple appearance, asking about a loan to start a small business. At the time, John had referred him to another manager, thinking he wouldn't go far. To his surprise, months later, the young man returned as a successful client, bringing with him an investment portfolio that had even impressed the bank's directors. John sighed. It seemed that, throughout his career, he had been making the same mistakes, guided more by what he saw on the surface than by who people truly were. Perhaps, because of this, he had been missing opportunities to establish genuine and lasting relationships with clients. It was as if there was an invisible barrier separating him from people, a barrier he had created himself and was only now beginning to see. He moved away from the window and returned to his desk, running his hands through his hair in frustration. He knew he needed to rethink his approach, but it was hard to admit that one of his primary practices was actually hurting his work. It was uncomfortable, almost painful, to accept that he was wrong. Yet something about Samantha had awakened this awareness, as if she had shown him a mirror in which he could see the truth about his own behavior. Deep down, John felt ashamed. He had built his career at the bank through hard work, always striving to be the best, but he had never stopped to consider whether his attitude was truly fair. Now, sitting there, he realized that maybe it was time for a change. Perhaps he needed to rethink the way he viewed clients and recognize that each one had a story and a value, regardless of their appearance or any other superficial detail. As he reflected, he felt a slight pressure in his chest, as if the doubt about his own professional integrity was suffocating him. He knew that if he didn't change, he would continue to make the same mistakes and alienate clients who, like Samantha, had knowledge and value. For a moment, he wondered what would happen if Samantha decided to take the matter further within the bank. He knew the bank's policy was clear: respect and equality for all clients. If that were questioned, his own career could be at risk. The truth was that John had never cared to confront reality with such depth. He was accustomed to judging, to interpreting people based on small cues, and he had never considered that this might be a problem. But after meeting Samantha, he felt compelled to look within himself and face the possibility that he was, in fact, sabotaging his own career and harming valuable clients. Feeling increasingly restless, John opened a notes app on his tablet and began to write. He wanted to list a few actions he could take to change. Something inside him told him this was the first step toward a necessary transformation. He wasn't exactly sure how he would do it, but the simple thought of wanting to improve brought a sense of relief. 1. Treat each client as unique, without making assumptions. He wrote the first line and paused, reflecting on what it truly meant to act in that way. For someone like him, used to making quick judgments, it would be a challenge, but he felt it was the right path. 2. Learn each client's story before drawing conclusions. Another line written, another reminder that he would need more patience and empathy. He remembered Samantha's gaze, the way she had confronted him, and it made him feel the urgency to change. As he wrote, John began to realize that this change could transform not only his career but also his life. It was as if Samantha had planted a seed of awareness in his heart, a seed that was now sprouting, bringing forth a desire to become a better person. He wanted, finally, to be a manager who saw beyond appearances, who respected the stories and struggles of each client, who was there not just to meet quotas but to build genuine relationships. When he finished his list, John felt a slight sense of relief. He knew the road would be long, but now he was determined to move forward. He decided that at his next consultation with Samantha, he would be different. He would bring a more humble and open attitude, ready to listen to her without judgment. She had confronted him, yes, but she had also given him a chance for redemption, and he wasn't going to waste it. The next morning, Samantha woke up early, feeling refreshed and determined. Her encounter with John the previous day had been uncomfortable, but it had also served as a reminder of her greater mission. Every obstacle she faced made her stronger, and over time, she had learned that sometimes it was necessary to confront people and situations that underestimated her abilities. The bank was just another step on this journey. She followed her morning routine as usual, brewing a strong coffee and mentally reviewing the day's plans. She dressed in a sophisticated yet understated way, gray linen pants and a white silk blouse. She added a sharply tailored blazer that emphasized her confident posture. It wasn't about impressing anyone but rather about showing that she knew what she wanted and was ready to claim her space. Samantha looked at herself in the mirror before leaving, taking a deep breath and recalling the memories that had resurfaced after her meeting with John. She had fought hard to be where she was and knew that her worth didn't depend on others' recognition. Though frustrating, that experience only reaffirmed her commitment to her own dignity and self-respect. She knew more challenges awaited, and she was ready to face them with her usual resolve. As she drove to the bank, Samantha felt calm and focused. In her mind, the meeting with John was more than a consultation. It was an opportunity to assert her position and ensure she was treated as she deserved. She knew he would have a second chance to demonstrate that he truly understood his mistake, and she hoped he would take it. When she arrived at the bank, Samantha noticed the busy lobby filled with hurried executives, clients coming and going, and staff attending to their duties meticulously at every counter. She was always fascinated by this atmosphere, seeing the bank as a symbolic representation of power and responsibility. For many, the environment was both sophisticated and intimidating, but she didn't feel uncomfortable there. She felt as if she belonged in that setting, someone who not only fit into that world but understood it deeply. A polite receptionist greeted her and asked her to wait for a moment. As she waited, she observed every detail around her, knowing she needed to stay calm and focused. This was an important meeting, and she wanted to ensure that this time, respect and equality would be at the center of every interaction. When John appeared in the lobby to call her, she noticed a change in his expression. He seemed more serious, almost introspective. Perhaps something in his demeanor reflected a new awareness, an acknowledgement of the error he had made. "Ms. Evans," John greeted her, his tone more reserved and even a bit hesitant. "Thank you for coming back today. I want to ensure that the service provided meets your expectations." Samantha nodded with a slight smile and followed John to the meeting room. The familiar setting gave her a sense of firmness. She sat upright, looking at John with calm resolve but without losing the determination in her gaze. He seemed more cautious and focused, perhaps mindful of the second chance she was giving him. "Ms. Evans, I'd like to start by thanking you for your patience and understanding at our last meeting," John said, sounding more sincere. "I've reflected on our previous interaction, and I sincerely hope to offer an experience more aligned with your expectations today." Samantha observed him closely, noting the effort in his words. Although she still had her reservations, she was willing to give him the opportunity to show that he understood the importance of treating her with dignity. "I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Miller," she replied calmly. "I'm here to discuss my investment options but also to ensure that respect and transparency are present in all our interactions. That's the type of service I expect from a bank of your stature." John nodded, with a seriousness she hadn't seen before. It seemed that, for the first time, he truly understood the impact of his actions. Without further hesitation, he began explaining the investment options with a clarity and care that had been missing before. His tone was respectful and professional, and Samantha noticed he avoided any condescending or presumptuous language. As John spoke, Samantha watched him closely, noting the small gestures that revealed his attempt to correct his mistake. He seemed to understand that she wasn't just any client but someone who demanded equal treatment and wouldn't accept anything less. She listened to his explanations attentively, but she was also evaluating the subtle change in his demeanor. When John finished presenting the options, Samantha asked direct questions without hesitation, testing his ability to respond transparently and without judgment. She wanted to ensure that the respect he was showing wasn't just a response to the previous incident but a genuine shift in his attitude. "These options are interesting, Mr. Miller," she said, her tone revealing her knowledge. "However, I'd like to explore the risk and profitability factors a bit more. Could you provide more details on how the bank manages these aspects?" John nodded quickly and confidently began explaining the risk mitigation strategies the bank used to protect clients' capital. His response was detailed and straightforward, which pleased Samantha, as it showed a genuine effort to answer her questions without underestimating her understanding. As the conversation progressed, Samantha felt increasingly confident that she was finally receiving the treatment she deserved. John's demeanor reflected a new level of respect, as if he were determined to make up for his mistake. Even so, she knew she needed to stay vigilant. He had been given a second chance, but it was up to him to show he was truly willing to change. After a long and productive conversation, John appeared both relieved and grateful. Samantha felt she had earned not only fair treatment but also his respect, and more importantly, she had shown him that no one should be underestimated. She stood up, extended her hand to John, and this time, she felt a different connection as they shook hands. It was as if, in that gesture, there was a mutual understanding of respect and acknowledgement. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Miller," she said with a slight smile. "I hope that, in the future, everyone who walks in here feels valued and respected." John nodded, clearly moved by her words. "I assure you, Miss Evans, I'll do my best to ensure that all clients receive the treatment they deserve. It's been a valuable lesson." Samantha left the bank with a sense of accomplishment. She knew that this meeting had been more than just a financial consultation. It had been a learning experience and a moment of transformation, both for her and for John. She felt strengthened, knowing that by standing up for her own worth, she was also helping ensure others would be treated with the same dignity. She walked through the streets of Velmor, taking a deep breath, feeling that she had achieved something important. Not just John's respect but also confirmation that the business world could be fair, if people were willing to confront their biases and seek change. And for Samantha, this was only the beginning. After the meeting with Samantha, John Miller returned to his office feeling relieved but also with a newfound awareness of his role as a manager. Something about the way Samantha had confronted him still resonated within, challenging him to rethink not only his practices but also the very environment he worked in. He now understood that banking services should not be about who appeared to have resources but about treating every client with respect and transparency. In the days that followed, John couldn't stop thinking about the impact of that encounter. He knew that, in a bank as prestigious as theirs, every client should be treated as a priority. However, he also knew that many of his colleagues approached clients in the same way he had until then, judging them based on appearances and superficial behaviors. It was as though Samantha had shone a light on a dark corner of the service system, and now he could no longer ignore it. After much reflection, John decided to take the issue further. He knew the bank had a formal customer service policy, but in practice, this policy often left room for biases and judgments. He sought out his immediate superior, the regional director, Richard Collins, a man known for his strict professionalism but also for being open to improvement suggestions. "Richard, I need to share a recent experience that made me reflect on how we can improve our service," John began, sitting down in front of the director in his office. "I believe some aspects of our service need a review to ensure that all clients, regardless of appearance or profile, receive the same level of respect and attention." Richard, looking curious, nodded and encouraged John to continue. John then recounted his experience with Samantha in detail, from his initial assumptions to the moment he realized his error and had to confront his own biases. He explained how her attitude had made him question deeply rooted practices, not just in himself but also within the bank as a whole. The director listened in silence, his gaze fixed on John, absorbing every word. When John finished, Richard leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands on the desk. He, too, had witnessed similar situations in his career, but rarely had someone come to him with such profound self-reflection. "John, I appreciate your honesty," Richard finally replied. "It's rare for someone to have the courage to reflect on their own biases. I have to admit what you said resonates with me. I've thought about how we could improve our approach, but I never gave it the full attention it deserved. It seems that Ms. Evans' experience was truly impactful." John nodded, feeling a sense of relief to find understanding in his superior. But he knew that reflection alone wasn't enough, action was needed. Inspired by Samantha's strong stance, he suggested that the bank implement training on inclusive and unbiased customer service for the entire team. He knew change was necessary but wanted to ensure that other colleagues also had the chance to confront their own biases and improve their service. "I believe we need something concrete, like a training program or an awareness initiative," John suggested confidently. We could bring in a specialist to guide our staff, focusing on the importance of impartial service and the impact of respect on our reputation as an institution. Richard considered the suggestion for a few moments. He knew that the bank's image was a priority, and such a program could not only improve customer service but also establish the bank as a model of respect and equality in the market. After a brief pause, he nodded and said, "I'll bring this up at our next board meeting." "I think you're right, John. We can and should be better." This experience with Ms. Evans shows us that sometimes it takes just one client to make us see where we're falling short. In the days that followed, the topic was brought to the bank's upper management. With Richard's support, John's proposal was approved, and the bank decided to implement extensive training on equitable customer service. The program would be led by experts in organizational behavior and would focus on eliminating unconscious bias and fostering empathy in customer interactions. Word quickly spread among employees, and soon everyone knew they would be undergoing an awareness process. Meanwhile, Samantha continued with her routine, unaware of the ripple effect her encounter with John had set in motion. She had no idea that, within days, her case would become a reference point within the bank, cited in meetings and discussions about the need for equality and respect. For her, that meeting had been an opportunity to reaffirm her strength and assert her own worth, but the change she had inspired went far beyond that. When she finally heard the news from a contact who worked at the bank, Samantha was surprised but also pleased. There was a quiet pride within her, realizing that her stance was generating positive, transformative impact. For her, that moment was not only a personal victory but a win for everyone who, like her, had ever been underestimated or unfairly judged at some point in their lives. Richard, in turn, decided to make the training program an integral part of the bank, a core pillar of its organizational culture. He realized that this was more than a temporary measure. It was an opportunity to redefine how the bank treated its clients, encouraging every employee to recognize and value the individuality and story of each person who walked through their doors. On the day the training program began, John was among the first to sign up. He knew that this process of transformation started with him, and he felt grateful for the opportunity to improve, not only as a professional but as a person. He thought of Samantha and how she had challenged him to see beyond appearances. She had unknowingly given him the push he needed to change, and now he wanted to live up to this new responsibility. After the first training session, John returned to work with a new mindset. He was more aware of his own attitudes and paid closer attention to every client, understanding the importance of listening and learning before jumping to conclusions. It was as if he could finally see his clients clearly, free from the layers of bias that had previously clouded his perspective. This transformation within the bank did not go unnoticed by clients. Soon, the bank began receiving praise for its respectful and distinguished customer service, solidifying its reputation in the market. Samantha became a kind of symbolic example within the institution, even without knowing it. To many employees, she was the client who had sparked change, the person who had had the courage to demand respect and equality. The Samantha effect, as some began to call it internally, became a reference point for a new culture within the bank. For John, this was the beginning of a journey of self-discovery and transformation, and he knew he owed it to her. He would never forget Samantha's firm and confident gaze that had challenged him to become more than he was. From that moment on, he understood that respect and dignity were the true values of a trusting relationship with clients. And for the bank, this transformation marked the start of a new chapter where every client, regardless of appearance or status, would be seen as a valuable partner, worthy of the best service and the deepest respect. A few weeks had passed since Samantha's second meeting with John at the bank. Her routine continued as usual, filled with business meetings, financial analysis, and strategic decisions, yet something inside her had changed. There was a quiet pride, a sense of accomplishment that followed her each day. Samantha recalled her conversation with John and how he had finally recognized her worth. Now, more than ever, she felt empowered and capable of inspiring change. One day, While reviewing a financial report in her office, Samantha received an unexpected email. It was from an old contact at the bank, an investment consultant she had known years ago. The message briefly summarized the changes that had occurred at the bank following her interaction, including a new training program that had been implemented to prevent bias and promote impartial and respectful customer service. Samantha read every line carefully, absorbing the details. She hadn't imagined her actions would have such a significant impact. The email explained that the program had been introduced across all the bank's branches as part of an effort to ensure no client would experience what she had. At the end, the consultant praised her courage and highlighted the positive effect of her stance. She leaned back in her chair, looking out the office window. She felt grateful and proud, yet also reflective. Changing the bank had never been her main goal. All she had wanted was to be treated with the respect she deserved. However, realizing that her actions had sparked such meaningful transformation made her think about the power of a firm and ethical stance. Samantha understood that, by demanding respect, she was opening doors for others to have the same opportunity. News of the bank's changes soon spread through the financial sector, drawing the attention of other institutions that began to see the need for implementing more inclusive and equitable service policies. Gradually, the financial industry in Velmor was discussing the bank's example and the importance of treating each client impartially without premature judgments. At a business event, Samantha was approached by a director from another financial institution. Smiling warmly, the woman greeted her and said, "Samantha, I've heard a lot about your stance at the bank. It was inspiring for us. I think we all need someone to remind us of the importance of equality and empathy." Samantha returned the smile, surprised and pleased to realize that her name was being associated with something so meaningful. The director's words echoed in Samantha's mind for days. It wasn't common in the financial sector to hear people speak openly about empathy and equality. The industry was known for being highly competitive and results-driven. Yet the recognition she was now receiving showed her that a new path was possible, one where people could pursue success without losing sight of mutual respect. As she pondered the impact of her actions, Samantha also began to reflect on her own legacy. She knew she had achieved much in her career, but now, beyond financial accomplishments, she wanted to be remembered for something greater, something that truly touched people and promoted change. She realized that every action she took was being watched and, perhaps, inspiring others. Every choice, every demand for respect, was an opportunity to pave the way for a new culture of integrity and dignity in the financial market. A few days later, upon arriving at her office, Samantha found an invitation on her desk. It was for a talk on ethics and inclusion in the financial sector, organized by a committee that promoted equality in Velmor's companies. The committee was inviting her to be one of the keynote speakers, someone who would share her experience and serve as an example for other professionals. Samantha read the invitation with a mixture of surprise and honor. She had always been a leader, but public recognition took her to a new level, where her actions had the potential to influence not only her peers but an entire sector. Accepting the invitation was an easy decision. She knew this was an important moment, an opportunity to share her convictions and encourage other professionals to reflect on their own biases and practices. In the following weeks, she dedicated herself to preparing her speech, considering how she would convey her message in a way that would genuinely inspire those who heard her. On the day of the talk, Samantha felt a bit anxious but also resolute. As she entered the auditorium, she saw that it was filled with executives, bank managers, young professionals, and other industry leaders. She knew many had heard about her stance at the bank, and now she would have the chance to show the human side behind her story. She began her speech by sharing her background, the challenges she had faced in earning respect in such a competitive market, and how every obstacle had strengthened her. Through her words, she made it clear that respect and dignity were values that should never be compromised. As she spoke, she saw attentive faces and sensed that her words were making a real impact. "We all have a responsibility," she said. not only to achieve results but to consider how we treat those around us. Success means more than meeting financial goals. It means building a career with integrity, with respect, and with an appreciation for the value of every person, regardless of their appearance or background. At the end of her talk, Samantha received a standing ovation. Many people came forward to thank her, sharing their own stories and expressing gratitude for her words. For Samantha, that moment was confirmation that she was on the right path. She realized that her journey went beyond investments and financial strategies. It was a journey of ethical leadership and transformation. That same day, she decided that she would continue to promote these values in every sphere she touched, whether in her businesses, future partnerships, or any new professional relationships she built. She knew that the impact she had at the bank was just the beginning and that now, more than ever, she had a responsibility to be a voice for all those seeking respect and equality. As she headed home, Samantha felt she had achieved something greater than any financial transaction. She had earned the chance to leave a legacy that, for her, held more value than any bank balance. And as she looked at the skyline of Velmor, with its lights and skyscrapers, she knew her next step would be to continue this mission, spreading the values of dignity and empathy wherever she went. After the talk and the recognition that followed, Samantha felt renewed. That experience had ignited a different flame in her heart, prompting her to reflect on the purpose of her journey in the business world. Until then, her motivations were clear: to build a successful career, ensure financial security, and achieve her personal goals. However, the impact she had made at the bank and how it was embraced by the financial sector showed her that she could go further. Now, she had the opportunity to turn her values into a solid foundation for every professional decision she made. In her office, while analyzing investment reports and proposals for new projects, Samantha began to incorporate this new vision into each choice. She started questioning how each of her actions could reflect respect, inclusion, and a commitment to integrity. It was no longer just about ensuring financial results, but about promoting a culture where ethical values were as important as numbers. One of her recent projects involved a financial technology startup focused on digital inclusion and financial education for low-income communities. Samantha had always been cautious about investing in new companies, but something about this proposal caught her attention. The startup, led by young idealists, aimed to democratize access to financial services, providing education and accessible tools for those who were typically overlooked by the traditional banking system. Samantha saw in this project an opportunity to contribute to transforming the market while putting her own values into practice. She knew an investment like this wouldn't bring immediate returns, but she recognized its potential for positive, long-term impact. Thus, she decided not only to invest but also to become a mentor to the team, helping them expand their operations and create a culture of respect and equality within the startup itself. In the initial meetings with the startup team, Samantha shared her ideas on the importance of inclusive service and a vision that valued each client. She spoke passionately about how she believed that the future of business lay in building relationships based on trust and mutual respect. The young team members listened attentively, absorbing every piece of advice and experience she brought, inspired by the journey she represented. "Never underestimate the power of respect," Samantha said during a strategic meeting. "In a world as competitive as this, what truly sets a company apart is how it treats people. If we can create an environment where everyone feels valued, that will be our greatest asset." The young entrepreneurs listened with admiration, impressed by Samantha's perspective. They saw in her a leader who not only understood the market but also saw beyond numbers, someone who recognized the human potential in everyone she encountered. As the months passed, the investment in the startup began to gain momentum. The company expanded its operations to several cities in Velmor, quickly attracting attention for its standout, personalized, and equal treatment. Samantha's impact on the startup's culture became visible, reflected in each interaction and every service offered. Clients who had previously struggled to interact with traditional banks now found a welcoming environment where they felt heard and respected. The startup story began to spread throughout the industry, and Samantha's reputation grew alongside it. Other investors started reaching out, interested not only in her financial success but also in how her projects embodied ethical and inclusive values. Soon, Samantha began receiving offers to join boards of companies seeking to establish a more inclusive and respectful organizational culture. She saw these opportunities as a chance to broaden her impact and introduce this new mentality to other institutions. One of these offers came from a renowned financial consulting firm that invited her to join its ethics and compliance board. The firm wanted to overhaul its internal practices to eliminate biases and promote equality in client service. Samantha knew this would be a significant responsibility but also a valuable opportunity to contribute her knowledge and experience. She accepted the invitation, determined to bring her transformative vision to a new audience. Upon assuming the role, Samantha proposed that the firm undergo a cultural audit, where each team member would reflect on their own biases and learn to value diversity. The proposal was bold and required considerable diplomacy, but with the support of the leadership, the project was approved. In the months that followed, the firm underwent a profound transformation, and Samantha was actively involved in each step, encouraging every employee to question their attitudes and rethink their daily practices. For Samantha, this was proof that her journey was taking the right direction. She was not only solidifying her career but also creating a legacy based on respect and integrity. She knew each of her actions inspired others and that, in a way, she was leaving her mark on Velmor's financial market. In a moment of reflection, Samantha remembered a phrase she had heard a long time ago from a friend during her early career: "When you know what truly matters, success follows." At the time, she hadn't fully understood the meaning of those words, but now, with everything she had built, she was beginning to understand. For her, true success wasn't just in numbers or financial gains. It was in making a difference in people's lives and contributing to a fairer world. She knew there was still much to be done, but she felt fulfilled. The respect she had demanded at the bank, which had been the starting point for so many changes, was now the central pillar of her career. The experience with John Miller had turned into a kind of turning point, guiding her on a journey filled with purpose and meaning. With this clear vision in mind, Samantha continued to expand her network and partnerships, always seeking opportunities to apply her values to new projects. Her presence in the market no longer went unnoticed. People respected her not just as an investor but as a leader who represented the integrity and dignity the market needed. She was an example to colleagues, young entrepreneurs, and professionals from all fields who sought to build solid careers without compromising their principles. Now, looking toward the future, Samantha knew that her next step would be to continue cultivating this culture of respect and equality. She was ready to do whatever it took for the business world to recognize the worth of each person, regardless of their background or appearance. Over time, Samantha's impact on the business world of Velmor extended beyond the companies and boards she was part of. She had become a respected figure not only for her financial achievements but also for the integrity she brought to each project and partnership. For the new generation of entrepreneurs and young professionals, Samantha was not just a successful investor, she was a model of ethical leadership and values that transcended the corporate world. Young professionals frequently sought her out for advice and guidance. For Samantha, nothing was more rewarding than sharing her experiences and helping those who wanted to build careers based on respect and empathy. She knew that each conversation, each meeting, was an opportunity to plant a seed, to encourage future leaders to challenge the status quo and keep their ethics front and center. One day, Samantha was invited to give a lecture at a local university, where the central theme was the value of respect and integrity in the financial market. The audience was filled with students of business, economics, and accounting, young people aspiring to build careers in a field often marked by pressure and fierce competition. Samantha accepted the invitation enthusiastically, seeing it as an opportunity to share her vision and inspire future professionals. When she arrived at the auditorium, she was greeted with warm applause. The young audience admired her. Many already knew her story and were eager to hear her words. Samantha began her talk by sharing her journey and how each obstacle she had faced had shaped her values and determination. But instead of focusing on challenges, she chose to speak about the choices she had made to stay true to herself, even when the path seemed difficult. At every stage of my career, there were moments when I was tested, moments when I had to choose between the easy path and staying true to my values, she said, looking at the audience seriously. If I could give you one piece of advice, it would be this: choose the path that feels right to your heart. Success without respect is an empty victory. Samantha's words resonated with the young audience. She shared honest stories from her early years, her struggles, and especially the times she had felt challenged to fight for respect. It was as if she was giving them a map to navigate the business world without losing the essence of who they were. After the talk, many students approached Samantha, some asking for career advice, others sharing their aspirations and insecurities. One young man in particular, named Alex, caught her attention. He was an economics student with a spark in his eyes, sharing that he dreamed of starting his own business but feared losing his sense of mission under the market's pressure. "I really admire what you've built," Alex said, his tone shy but determined. "My dream is to create a company that offers opportunities for young people from underserved communities, but I'm afraid that once I enter the market, it will be hard to keep that purpose alive." Samantha listened closely and immediately connected with Alex's passion and concerns. She knew how challenging it was to stay firm when everyone around seemed focused solely on profit, but she also knew it was possible as long as he kept a clear sense of purpose. "Alex, your vision is powerful, and I can see it comes from your heart. The path may be difficult, but remember that integrity and respect are the foundations that will give you strength to overcome any challenge," she said with an encouraging smile. "If you hold on to that purpose, your business won't just be successful, it will make a true impact on people's lives." Her words moved the young man, who promised himself not to give up on his dream. Samantha felt a genuine connection with him, recognizing the same determination that had driven her at the start of her career. That meeting made her realize that her legacy went far beyond projects and investments. It lived in every person inspired by her story to create something meaningful. Over time, Samantha continued to receive messages from young people like Alex, individuals who saw her as a mentor and a guide for courage and ethics in a competitive market. She made it a priority to keep in touch with many of them, encouraging and, whenever possible, offering guidance and support. She had become, in a way, a trusted figure in Velmor for those who believed that business could be conducted with humanity and respect. One day, Samantha was invited to participate in a panel on ethical entrepreneurship, alongside other leaders and investors in the city. The roundtable would be broadcast live, and the theme was building a legacy of respect and responsibility in the corporate world. Throughout the panel, Samantha spoke about the importance of seeing people as an essential part of any business, emphasizing that true success lay in the positive impact each action had on society. "I believe we all have a responsibility beyond financial results," she said in a firm voice. "Our duty is to build something that not only generates profit but also contributes to the growth of those around us. We cannot forget that respect and dignity are the foundation of any relationship, whether personal or professional." The discussion attracted significant attention, and the response was intense. Samantha had become, almost unknowingly, a spokesperson for a new vision of business and leadership, a vision that was gaining traction in Velmor. Inspired by her, many young professionals and entrepreneurs began seeking ways to make a difference, building their careers without losing sight of the values that motivated them. This influence on the new generation brought Samantha a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew her journey had been marked by challenges, prejudices, and fights for recognition, but now she saw that each battle had contributed to something greater. She was not just a successful businesswoman. She was a mentor, a source of inspiration, and a living example that success could be achieved without sacrificing principles. Samantha's legacy continued to grow, and she felt there was still much more to be done. There were other Alexes out there, young people who needed guidance, people who needed to be reminded that respect and integrity were the foundational values of any career. She knew that as long as there were people willing to listen and learn, her role as a mentor would remain meaningful. And so, Samantha continued her journey, aware that each word, each piece of advice, and each action she took was shaping the future. Velmor was changing, and she was honored to be a part of that transformation. Every young person who found inspiration in her journey was, for her, a reminder that true leadership didn't mean being followed, but rather helping others find their own path. After years of solidifying her career and becoming a reference for ethics and respect in the financial market, Samantha felt it was time to take a step further. The leadership opportunities she had built and the values she promoted began to spark in her a desire to do something that would directly impact people's lives even more. She knew that with her position and influence, she could contribute to a more inclusive and fair future, and this mission deeply motivated her. Gradually, Samantha began getting involved with local organizations focused on education and social inclusion. One of the first projects that caught her attention was a professional training initiative for at-risk youth, organized by a Velmor-based NGO. The organization offered free courses and mentorship programs, helping young people find opportunities in the job market. Samantha knew the importance of solid, accessible education, as her own path had been marked by struggles to overcome financial limitations and prejudices. She felt that supporting these young people was a way to give back to the community that had welcomed her. On one of her first visits to the NGO center, Samantha was warmly received. Many of the young people knew her story and saw her as an example that success was possible regardless of initial challenges. She became a constant presence at the organization's activities, participating in talks, conversations, and even leading workshops on financial planning and entrepreneurship. One of the most memorable moments for her was meeting Helena, a 17-year-old who dreamed of starting her own business. Helena worked part-time to help her family and attended the professional training program at night. When Samantha asked about her ambitions, Helena's eyes lit up with a confidence that deeply moved Samantha. "I want to open a sustainable clothing store," Helena said with a confidence that surprised Samantha. "I want to create something that makes a difference, that helps people, and respects the environment." In Helena, Samantha saw the same determination and idealism that had driven her at the beginning of her career. She decided she would do everything she could to support this young woman's dream. Through one of her companies, she offered Helena a scholarship to study business administration and sustainable development at one of the best technical schools in the city. Additionally, she became her mentor, providing practical advice and helping her develop a business plan for her future store. The partnership between the two grew, and Helena became an example for other young people attending the NGO. Over time, Samantha realized her influence went beyond guidance and advice. She was building a network of support and inspiration, helping young people see their potential and believe in their own dreams. This involvement with social causes broadened Samantha's view of the impact that the business world could have on people's lives. She began to see social responsibility as an essential part of her professional role. At a board meeting of a major company she was part of, she proposed the creation of a corporate social responsibility program. The goal was to allocate a portion of profits to initiatives focused on digital inclusion and professional training for young people. Initially, the idea faced some resistance. Some directors saw the program as an unnecessary expense and questioned whether the return for the company justified the investment. But Samantha was determined, and she used her experience and knowledge to defend the proposal with conviction, presenting data and arguments that highlighted the positive impact such initiatives could have on the company's reputation and culture. "We're not just talking about numbers," she explained with a serious and persuasive tone. "We're talking about responsibility. A company's success should be aligned with the well-being of the community that surrounds it. And if we want to build a lasting legacy, it is our duty to create opportunities for those in need." After some intense meetings, Samantha's proposal was approved. The corporate social responsibility program became a reality, and she was chosen to lead its implementation. Her first action was to allocate part of the funds to support the NGO's project, ensuring that more young people would have access to courses and mentorship. Over time, the program expanded and began to fund other educational and professional training initiatives in Velmor. The impact was immediate and positive. The company gained recognition for its commitment to the community, and other organizations started to follow its example. Samantha felt fulfilled seeing her idea not only succeed but also help transform many lives. Samantha's influence on Velmor's social causes grew to the point where she was invited to join the city's Social Responsibility Committee. The committee brought together business leaders, community leaders, and NGO representatives who worked together to find solutions to issues such as unemployment, education, and social inequality. She became an active voice in the meetings, proposing innovative ideas and promoting alliances between the private sector and social initiatives. During one of these meetings, Samantha proposed creating a fund to encourage social entrepreneurship. The fund would provide resources to young entrepreneurs with social impact projects, encouraging them to develop solutions to real community problems. The idea was well received, and within a few months, the fund was launched with the first round of investments aimed at initiatives in education, health, and sustainability. For Samantha, this project symbolized a new phase in her career. She felt she was transforming the environment around her, leaving a legacy of empowerment and opportunity for future generations. Each young person who received a scholarship, each project that received support, was a step toward a world where respect and dignity were guaranteed for all. Velmor began to change with these initiatives. The impact of the fund and the social actions promoted by Samantha and her partners was visible. More young people had access to education and training, more entrepreneurs were able to get their projects off the ground, and the community began to see that success could be shared. Over time, Samantha realized that her role extended far beyond boardrooms and the financial market. She had become a figure of transformation, someone who showed, through her actions, that business could be a positive force in society. She felt grateful for each opportunity to help and inspire, for each dream she helped make real. For her, this was the true value of her journey. She had started her career with the goal of building a solid and respectable career, but now she understood that her greater purpose was to give back, create opportunities, and change lives. Every young person she met, every person she inspired, was a new reason to continue her mission. And so, Samantha continued her path, determined to keep expanding her impact. She knew there was much more to be done, but she also knew that every action counted, every initiative had value, and that the legacy she was building was just the beginning of something much larger. With the growing success and reach of her initiatives in Velmor, Samantha began attracting the attention of influential figures across the country. Entrepreneurs, leaders in the financial sector, and government officials wanted to hear her ideas and understand how they could replicate the model of responsibility and inclusion she had established in her businesses and social projects. Samantha, who had previously focused on her city and her companies, now felt that her mission was expanding into something much larger. Her first major national invitation came from a prominent business summit held annually in the capital. The summit gathered top leaders from corporations, financial institutions, and government to discuss market trends and challenges. Samantha was invited to be one of the keynote speakers, addressing the theme, Transformative Companies, the importance of social responsibility and respect in corporations. She felt honored and excited, recognizing this as a golden opportunity to share her vision with an even wider audience. As she took the stage, Samantha noticed that the audience was packed. Present were not only major business leaders and CEOs but also young entrepreneurs, independent professionals, and respected journalists. She began her talk by recounting her transformative experiences in Velmor, from her encounter at the bank to her work with the NGO and the Social Entrepreneurship Fund. She shared her stories with sincerity and passion, conveying the lessons she had learned at each stage of her journey. "We are here not just to lead companies but to lead a movement of respect and responsibility," she stated with a firm, inspiring voice. "I believe that the true power of a company lies in its commitment to the community and the well-being of all. And this is only possible when we put people at the center of our decisions." Samantha's words echoed through the auditorium, and she saw in the audience's attentive expressions the impact her message was having. The audience absorbed every idea and experience she shared, realizing that it was possible to build a successful career without compromising essential values. For many, her perspective was fresh, a new way of thinking about leadership. At the end of her talk, Samantha received a standing ovation. Many attendees approached her to express their gratitude, including CEOs of large corporations and government representatives who saw in her an inspiring and transformative leader. From that moment on, Samantha's name began appearing in national discussions about corporate responsibility and ethics in business. Her message was clear and captivating. Corporate success should not be detached from positive impact and respect for others. Shortly after the summit, Samantha was invited to join a committee within the Ministry of Economy, dedicated to developing new guidelines to encourage companies to adopt social and environmental responsibility practices. The proposal was to create a certification seal for companies committed to these values, offering tax incentives and institutional recognition. The invitation both surprised and honored Samantha, who saw it as an opportunity to contribute to profound and lasting change. In the committee meetings, Samantha shared her ideas and experiences with a group of leaders and specialists. She proposed that the certification seal include clear criteria to assess each company's social and environmental impact, ensuring that actions were genuine and not mere marketing strategies. Her hands-on experience and commitment to responsibility gave the committee a unique perspective, and her suggestions were widely adopted in the development of the guidelines. When the certification program was finally launched, many companies across the country applied for the Social and Environmental Responsibility Seal. Those who obtained certification received not only tax benefits but also public recognition for their commitment to the community and the environment. Samantha felt that, slowly, a new mindset was taking hold in the market, one where profits were not the sole objective and where societal well-being was an essential part of corporate success. Samantha's influence continued to grow, and her name became associated with a new era of ethical and inclusive leadership. She began receiving invitations to speak at universities and corporate events across various cities, where she shared the importance of a leadership style that prioritized building a fairer society. Her schedule was packed, but each engagement was, for her, an opportunity to inspire others to follow the same path. At one of these talks, at a renowned business university, Samantha met a professor of business ethics named Dr. Carla Mendez. The professor was an enthusiast of Samantha's work and invited her to collaborate on a research project examining the impact of inclusive business practices across different economic sectors. Samantha accepted the invitation eagerly, seeing it as an opportunity to document and demonstrate the benefits she had already experienced firsthand. The research project gained momentum, and Samantha began meeting regularly with Dr. Carla and a team of researchers. Together, they analyzed data from various companies, studying the impact of inclusive and sustainable policies on financial performance and employee satisfaction. Initial findings showed that companies valuing inclusion and respect had not only a positive impact on the community but also higher engagement and productivity rates. The research was published in academic journals and caught the attention of business leaders nationwide. The data served as concrete evidence that Samantha's model was effective, showing that respect and social responsibility were, in fact, powerful levers for business success. Companies that had previously resisted adopting inclusive practices began reconsidering, influenced by the research and Samantha's presence as a leader in the sector. Gradually, Samantha became a national figure of reference for corporate responsibility. Her presence at high-level events was in demand, and she had become a trusted advisor to entrepreneurs seeking to align their practices with the values she championed. With her firm but gentle approach, She demonstrated that true success was achieved when people were respected and invested in for their well-being. For Samantha, this recognition was an opportunity to multiply the positive impact she sought in each initiative. She knew that now she was no longer striving alone. There were other leaders, companies, and institutions, inspired by her vision, willing to drive significant change across the country. Samantha's journey was beginning to evolve into a movement. The new mindset of responsibility and respect in the Brazilian market was expanding, and she knew there was still much to be done. But with the collaboration of so many leaders and the support of society, she was confident that real transformation was on the way. Reflecting on her journey, Samantha felt a profound sense of gratitude. She knew that every step taken, every obstacle overcome, and every victory achieved had led her to this moment. She had transformed not only her life and career but was now impacting society as a whole, ushering in a new era of respect, dignity, and responsibility in business. Years after beginning her journey in the financial sector and becoming a national voice for responsibility and respect in business, Samantha Evans was recognized not only as a successful investor but as a true pioneer of business ethics and corporate responsibility. Her influence extended far beyond the companies she had founded or the projects she had invested in. Samantha had become the symbol of a new kind of leadership, where success was measured by the positive impact left on people's lives and on society. Over the years, the programs and initiatives Samantha supported flourished, leaving a profound mark on the Velmor community and beyond. The NGO she helped with vocational training expanded its reach, now offering training programs in various regions. Helena, the young woman Samantha had supported with a scholarship to study and open her sustainable clothing store, had become a successful entrepreneur herself, continuing Samantha's legacy by providing job opportunities for young people from low-income backgrounds. The businesses in Velmor, inspired by her vision and guidance, adopted practices of inclusion and sustainability. In every institution where she left her mark, there was a new culture of empathy and responsibility. Managers, professionals, and entrepreneurs kept Samantha's lesson alive, that every client, every employee, and every person deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. The movement Samantha had started in her city had spread, creating significant change in how corporations engaged with society. Over time, Samantha's legacy solidified in the form of an institute bearing her name, founded to promote financial education, entrepreneurship, and the development of ethical leaders. The Samantha Evans Institute offered scholarships, workshops, and mentorship programs for young talent seeking to create socially impactful businesses. The Institute also conducted research on the impact of ethical practices in the market and provided support for organizations interested in implementing social responsibility initiatives. The Institute's work was a living tribute to Samantha and her ideals. At one of her final public events, Samantha was honored by business leaders, government representatives, and hundreds of young people who saw her as a mentor and an inspiration. On stage, she spoke about the importance of staying true to one's values and having the courage to do what is right, even when the path seemed difficult. Her words, delivered with calm and sincerity, resonated with everyone in the auditorium, reminding them that true success lies in building something that makes a difference. I want each of you to remember that the power of transformation lies in your hands, Samantha said, moved. Be leaders of respect, empathy, and dignity. The business world can and should be a force for good, and that begins with how we treat people and the impact we wish to leave. That evening was a celebration of Samantha's life and career. Over the years, she had become much more than a corporate leader. She was a force for transformation, a champion of respect, and a mentor to those seeking a path of integrity in the business world. Her message of responsibility and empathy had touched countless lives and would continue to influence people far beyond her time. After her retirement, Samantha dedicated her time to the Institute and mentorship projects. She continued to support young entrepreneurs and develop initiatives to bring financial education and opportunities to underserved communities. The Institute became a nationwide reference, attracting support from companies and institutions wanting to follow her example and contribute to building a fairer and more equitable society. Samantha's contributions were formally recognized when she received one of the country's highest honors for her service to society. It was a rare achievement for someone from the financial sector, but for her, it was yet another confirmation that she was on the right path. However, for Samantha, the most valuable reward remained every person who could reach their dreams, every young person inspired by her work, and every company that adopted practices of respect and responsibility. As time passed, Samantha became a legendary figure, with her story being shared in universities, companies, and community centers. For the new generation, she was an example of courage and commitment to a higher purpose. Many of the young people inspired by her vision now held leadership positions, replicating and expanding the impact of her legacy across different regions of the country. The work she had started blossomed and thrived, and the market, once dominated by competition and profit, began embracing a more collaborative and conscious mentality. Samantha's words continued to echo, reminding everyone that the true power of business lies in the impact it has on people's lives. Her story was living proof that respect and integrity were not obstacles to success but rather the foundation that sustained all lasting achievements. Looking back at the work she had left behind, Samantha felt a deep sense of gratitude. She knew that throughout her life, she had found her purpose and fulfilled a mission that went beyond numbers and financial transactions. She had transformed the market, touched lives, and created a movement that would continue to grow and inspire people for years to come. Thus, Samantha Evans' legacy remained strong, not only in Velmor but throughout the country. Her name became synonymous with respect, empathy, and responsibility. And as she always said, true success is that which transforms the world around us. This was the teaching Samantha left for future generations, a legacy that could not be measured in figures, but in the lasting impact she left on people and society. If you love stories that touch the heart and surprise you with every chapter, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here, we're dedicated to bringing you new content every day, pouring passion into each story we create. Every subscription makes a huge difference and helps us continue bringing more chapters from the city of Velmor. So, if you'd like to support us and keep these stories coming, hit that subscribe button and join this adventure. Thank you for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video.